Greetings ladies and gents, and welcome to today's Reddit Quickie video, taken from the HFY subreddit called Copulaters, written by Lostfol. The original will be linked down below, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Kotal watched as the cadets came into the hangar. This was their final and possibly most important lesson before they were awarded their ships, an important symbol of first contact. Looking at the variety of races, he couldn't help but feel pride in the Galactic Alliance's species, their red, yellow, blue, or grey uniforms representing the cadet specialty. He could almost smell the excitement in the air as they marched in. Behind them was the ship of each new member of the exploratory group. On the one side of each ship was an emblazoned symbol of the Corps Gas X. As the last of the graduating cadets fell into formation, he stepped up to the broadcaster. It projected his voice and image so all the ship crews assembled in the hall could see and hear what happened. The pride each species wore as they watched the cadets about to have their final lesson and become captains almost made them glow. Cadets, this is your final lesson before you become exploratory captains and get your ships. At this, a cheer went up. They all knew the lesson was their last, their secret lesson that the Gas X captains considered sacred. As you all know, the Dalek have been a threat to the Galactic Alliance of Species, or GAS, for thousands of cycles. This threat is what united our species. Together, Gas fought bravely in each system, losing many brave souls. We were steadily losing systems to the massive resource-hungry Dalek war machine. The Dalek did not negotiate. All organic matter, to include sentience, went into the vats to become biomass. They, cleansed the worlds that they captured, consumed those worlds' resources to support their parasitic fleet. Several hundred species were lost over the many long cycles. As he said this, the displays were cycling through images of some of the lost species. This stopped and settled on one of the few images that they had of the Dalek fleet. This part of the ceremony was always awe-inspiring. The image of the Dalek fleet inspired fear, even now, thousands of years later. Then suddenly, inexplicably, they stopped. They seemed to simply disappear. At first, we had feared that the building up was such a push into the core worlds. We put our entire economy behind building our defenses, but the long-range sensors stayed quiet. The screen showed the front of the war as it eroded time-lapse, so it didn't take too long. The erosion of the gas space as the Dalek fleet took world after world, a counter, and the top displaying the lost lives. Up until this point, the war with the Dalek had been an endless grind. Up until that point, they had been making consistent, predictable progress through our systems, targeting any system with organic matter. They arrived at the nearest system to the location, defeat any present force, and strip it apart in one cycle. They always arrived in full force and used their overwhelming numbers to crush resistance in the system. Their vats cared not if biomass was alive or dead when it came into it. Disturbing images captured during the centuries' prior harvest of cycles on the screens. Lions of sentient creatures being marched to their death, or executed and having their bodies flung into the vats. Dalek in advanced combat armor tearing through the poor defenders. This was important. The new captains had to understand the horror of the race and how powerful their advanced were. The silence in the hall was such that you could even hear the ventilation cycling. The Dalek had been the stuff of nightmares. Up until the sudden peace, there were only a few instances over the thousands of years where it took 1 or 2 cycles for them to show up. Likely, they found a planet that we hadn't contacted yet. But this new now was unprecedented. We kept building our defenses, but after they hadn't attacked for 25 cycles, we knew that something had changed. Images of massive defensive structures in orbit around many of the core worlds came up, each named after an associated race's deities. They stood in the hangar of one such station now. To be fair, since the 20th cycle, the Alliance had debated sending scouts to see what happened. Too many of us rightly feared what we'd find. The Dalek were cunning foes and had severely hurt the gas a few times by leading us into ambushes. At this, images of ship graveyards floating in dead systems came up in detail with the great view screens. Finally, the first expedition was sent. It was a small, fast ship, equipped with the best sensors of the Alliance. A small, sleek craft not at all that different from those behind the captain's now showed. The Gas X emblem was on the side proudly showing. They began a great search. We had to know what happened to the Dalek. None of our races could risk dropping our guard and having them reappear. Yet each system the explorers entered, they found the same lifeless husks of planets, each stripped of resources by the Dalek fleet. There weren't even remnants of ships left in the battles, in most, as even that had salvaged and reclamated. Here, the real horror of the Dalek started to sink in as the images of dead world after dead world cycled on the screen. For the first exploratory fleet, they endured the hell of jumping into dead systems up to 50 times a cycle for 10 cycles without finding any sign of what happened. The galactic map came up again. Systems scanned were gradually going from red to grey. At a point after the 35th cycle without an attack, our fear began to turn to curiosity. The systems remained dead, none moved to colonize these graves. To this day they remain, a testimony to the threat of the Dalek presented. Without resources, one cannot rebuild. This made the number of systems that could be scanned a cycle drop as the distances and fuel kept getting greater. The galactic map on the screen showed the time-accelerated red dots starting to turn grey quickly. By the 5th cycle of the Great Search, Gas had already launched 20 more ships to help search. Detailed scans were done, searching for any sign of our foe. The Dalek harvested thousands of systems, wiping out unknown races that we'll never know existed, in order to build a terrifying migratory fleet. They had the most advanced technology that we've ever seen. These dead worlds, likely, each contributed a piece to the parasites. At this point, every eye in the hangar was glued on the map, showing the scans of an unknown space the Dalek had come from. This region is what we have come to know as the Dead Zone. Each system we entered and scanned, logged and left. Eventually, some out of fuel and watch stations were put out in the Dead Zone to help with the effort, but no sign of the Dalek was left. At this point, many of the races were looking for new worlds to expand to, but naturally, none wanted to be near the Dead Zone. Just the scout ships indexed worlds and dead zones. The map now started to show the gas expansion on the universe map. After 50 cycles, as the systems checked was approaching 340,000, there was finally a find. The now famous scout ship, the Wanderer, had been finishing up their scan when they made a historic find. It literally bounced off their hull. The chance of such a find we can't even begin to communicate. There was an object drifting through the system made of silica, a strange bit of wood, heavy metals, and a slight electronics. The screen now shifted to show the original images of the captured find. With great care they approached the object and managed to recover it. But they knew what to make of it. The object made no sense to any of us at the time. At this point, it showed initial scans, signs of radiation, the unknown organic wood and silica compound made up from the casing. The outer shell was a form of silica from through the heat had been shaped into a container. They would learn this to be called a fifth. A glass fifth contained a dense metal object shielding it by a small data store. The screen showed the images of the object contained in the shielding housing being transported to a research lab. We studied the device for another 6 cycles, trying to unlock its secrets. It took us several cycles to remove the data store. This only occurred after discovering a way this historical artifact could be preserved. The piece of wood had to be pulled out intact without destroying it or the silica that housed it in it. We could not risk losing some clue as to what happened. The image moved to show the original organic seal on the table. It then cut to images of the lab where a variety of species in the hazardous material gear. Thankfully this was done in a clean room by scientists in full hazard equipment. When the fragile piece of wood came free, the chemical alarms immediately alerted the fumes of flammable gas was present. Thankfully, these were in low enough quantities to be no threat. The screen now showed the moment of removal, with the alarms blaring and the scientists scrambling away until it was clear was called. Attempts to extract the metal container had proven frustrating, until Professor Dalek picked it up and turned the spout down, and started shaking it while yelling at the bottle. Thankfully, that historical moment was entirely captured on the monitors documenting the research. The screens now shifted to a reptilian Garoth, who, after dropping his tongues, appeared to silently shouting something as he picked up the container and started shaking it until the device falls through the neck of the container. It took our scientists several more cycles to figure out how to get the data off the alien device. It was a device known to take parts of computer memory and allow them to be transported. This one contained 3 files, of which one was decrypted and successfully translated. This shows an image of the circuitry inside a housing, the same circuitry that had survived the radiation of space due to the dense metal shield. Unfortunately, we may never learn the contents of the data packets. New folder and new folder 1. Both were corrupted to the point that no data was found inside of them. Luckily, we did find some file of listmsg.mp4. This taught us the important lesson that we impart to you, our future exploration captains. The images flashed up on the past exploration captains in all their glory, many noted heroes within the GAS. The creatures who designed the device apparently see across wide ranges of spectrums when compared to the races of GAS. The data for the image generation and animation, but we lacked the viewer that could show it. The images shifted to showing a multitude of archaic viewers that now only existed in museums. A general rumble of different species chuckles could be heard through the hall. Leveraging our diversity, scientists from across the Alliance put together a viewer with pieces of 5 different races' technology. The ability to display life in so many wavelengths of light launched our communications and broadcast technology by 1,000 cycles alone. Suddenly, a single projector and a single data format could be seen by all races. It was a solution to a problem that we didn't even realize that we had. We marveled at how advanced this race must have been to create such a device. Even today, as you gaze upon the imagery that you have seen today, you view it on one such device. At this moment, the image cycled back to show the audience the young cadets. Once we had the imagery, we were pleased to learn that our standard translators quickly decoded this language and translated it for the race to understand. These devices had been essential to the founding of the GAS thousands of years ago, and continue to work in such a fashion. Archaic technology, but reliable. Images of the standard nanite injector translated to all species that got upon the gas flashed across the screen. What we saw, we still struggle to understand. I want you to see an undiscovered alien species and understand the importance of first contact. This is also why we only scout the edges of the dead zone, and all scouts were immediately recalled from that space. The lights in the hangar dimmed slightly, and the screen glowed, showing up was obviously the damaged interior of an alien craft, with a single alien sitting in a chair in front of it. A warning klaxon can be heard in the background, and the whole site seemed to flash as light strobed across the scene with the ship. Each race perceived it differently, but all agreed that the waves of brightness would wash over the dark behind the alien, giving it an almost surreal glimpse as the alien structure behind it. Its base appeared to be illuminated as it focused the entire time. In its hands was a fifth, but it contained an amber-colored liquid. The alien looked directly at the camera. Not being familiar with the species, he had to rely on the translator's emotional cue feed, which was flashing up different emotions at a rate that was hard to comprehend. The alien at first seemed to be looking at something near the camera, and then picked up a bottle and drank directly from it. His skin seemed off and looked as though it might be ill, and he began to speak. I am Private, and momentarily the copulating acting captain of Lucas Saltar, of what remains of the experimental ship Hawking. It would appear that I am the only survivor of our copulating encounter with the copulating hive. At this point, the image of the video was imposed in the corner of the Dalek mothership. The fleet that for over 1,000 years was a doom who saw it. The emotion of the translator seemed to flash between resignation, defiance, and pride in mixers. According to the copulating readings on this copulating timer, some copulating engineer decided to be here. He briefly took something off screen. It'll be here for another 34 minutes, and how every many copulating fractions of a copulating second flash by. I'd love to know what copulating engineer thought we needed 4 decimal places. Anyway, before I forget, I am reading this for whoever finds it, so that they won't know what copulating happened here. With this, it stated the alien picked up his fifth and takes another drink from it. In the spirit of our copulating past, I plan on taking a copy of this copulating recording, sticking it in this copulating fifth, and which I need to copulate finish before that copulating timer dies. Then I'm going to shoot this little copulator out into space. I know the copulating drones monitored the whole thing. I'm sure every copulatory on our copulating race is celebrating, likely getting copulating drunk. This copulating recording seems better than sitting here watching this copulating clock count down and listening to the racket. Love to find the copulating engineer who copulating thought of putting the copulating emergency shutoff on the bridge. Copulating safety features. At this point, the alien raised its hand and began to rub the structure between its eyes. It took another swig of its fifth and then continued. Having seen the force of the copulating hive hit us with an Alpha Centauri, we knew that copulating copulators meant business. We had to do something copulating extreme to have the copulating hope of surviving. Hence the birth of the ship Hawking. Copulate. I knew that we had something crazy copulating experiments with creating copulating black holes on Earth, but first copulating time I've seen us do this. Another swig, and his eyes seemed a little less focused now. He reached over and picked up a recording device that he had been speaking to. Turning it towards what was initially appeared to be a shimmer, he began speaking again. After what the copulating hive did to Centauri, we copulating knew that we would hit this copulating colony next. Their warships aren't particularly strong. There is just a copulate load of them. Thankfully, the copulating are taking their copulating time in the Alpha Centauri. After the rest of the copulators in our copulating race have seen the slaughter of the hive brought, it has finally united us copulators. Through the shimmer, the viewers could start making out the chaos of a destroyed system. Even the sun was distorted, no longer round and flinging blazing balls at planets, moons, and asteroids crashing into each other, and fragments went everywhere. We evacuated the colonists before we launched the Operation Copulate U. We turned to our copulating scientists, and in true copulating human spirit, we designed the biggest weapon we could copulating think of. This system. Pride, shame, anger, and relief showed on the emotional reader. Even the Dalek had never destroyed a entire system like that before. The damage was beyond comprehension as the audience sat slack-jawed. Coatal couldn't help but feel a bit of humor as he watched their reaction to the aliens' recount. This video had never been released to the general populace by universal agreement of the Alliance members' leadership after their first private viewing. It was rumored, but only those who became captain and their crews got to actually see it. Coatal couldn't remember how many times he'd seen it, but the aliens still both enthralled and terrified him. By now, most of your copulators probably already know how the Hawking's principle, copulating, whatever goes into the black hole, comes out as a radiation only, was proven in our pre-colony days by some copulating scientists on experimenting with copulating black holes on our only planet at the time. Crazy copulators. This was the part Coatal always felt a chill. This video, the narrator never thought another race would find it. He figured his own would. The gas had no idea who Hawking even was, but if these principles of war did this damage that they were observing, he must have been a mighty force. Well, I guess we copulators validated it. No one was copulating able to create a true black hole to test the prior to this. Not that we didn't copulating think of it. Not like copulating environmentalists stopped us from dropping copulating nukes on our copulating self. The matter-of-fact nature of the creature stated was chilling. This race played with some of the universe's most powerful forces. Nuke had long been determined, despite the terrible implication, to be nuclear. The splitting of the atom on one's own planet was almost unthinkable. The ship and the copulating sister Einstein were designed to copulate and create a black hole so that we could copulating study it. At the time, the copulating environmentalists got the program banned due to concerns about what effects a black hole would have on a system that it was in. As the audience could see the shattered remains of the system drifting behind the alien, it was hard to argue with the environmentalists. What brings me today, our two ships were sent to stop the copulating hive. We were all copulating volunteers expecting to copulating die soon as we were seen. I didn't care. I lost my copulating family in Centauri. Hell, most of us on these ships did. We were told that it would be a quick death. No one mentioned this copulating countdown clock or potential of living this long. At this point, the alien was visibly paler and could start of the video. Each string from the fifth seemed to steady it. Pain, pride, victory, and resignation kept flashing as he talked. Coatal always felt a lump at his throat at this point. Gas had lost so many soldiers, but he had never had one speak directly to him. One that he knew was dead. We knew the copulating hive would come here, and even copulating were they entered the normal space. Copulating predictable copulators. So we parked our ships and waited. It was a copulating desperation move. Copulating black hole might just kill us all, but we knew the fleet they sent planned to. Thoughtful was the expression, the indicators only reading. It was obvious to all who watched that the species knew exactly what they were doing and the risk. Copulator. Wish I could tell you there was some great space battle, or we had to pass like the copulating Spartans. But in truth, we unleashed a copulating physics on the sons of the female canine species. We fired whatever copulating scientists had to put on all these copulating experimental ships. We watched fascinated as two beams intersected in the middle of the biggest copulating hive ship we saw. There, the video showed the entire Dalek migratory race entering normal space. Their entire race lived on the central colony ship. In a flash, the very universe began to distort as those ships disappeared into the dark dot. The alien started making noises while the mood indicator read amusement. It was a copulating glorious moment, watching the unleashed darkness suddenly warping around and swallowing up their entire copulating fleet. We got to that copulating fleet before they even fired a shot. Just one catch. We positioned our ships outside of the area, likely to be the copulating kill zone. Copulating metric versus imperial units again. The display showed frustration, anger, and then resignation. Why can't we ever copulating learn? We had copulating known that this copulating artificial hull wouldn't last long, and that didn't stop it from wrecking this copulating system. Guess the copulating environmentalists were right. The creature appeared to have trouble breathing, as it turned and spit the dark red substance out, then looked and took a drink of his fifth. Every copulating thing was moved by the copulating gravity well. It collapsed before we would have entered it. We copulating thought we had copulating made it. And then copulating debris of moons, planets, asteroids, and whatever else was in this copulating system came flying our way. Both of our copulating ships were destroyed, except for this copulating piece of copulating cargo hold that the copulating captain asked me to retrieve his copulating fifth from. At this point, the alien took a long drink from the fifth, almost polishing off the bottle. He had more blood in his lips, and his skin looked more discolored. He was dying before their eyes, yet there was a fire in his eyes, a defiance even. So here I am, wondering if the emergency copulating field holding this copulating air, temporary copulating room life support system failure, copulating radiation exposure, or all the scrap that I'm drinking will copulating kill me first. Based on the copulating timer, I'm guessing it's power failure. So that's our glorious victory of the copulating hive. Mission, copulate you, is copulating success. Yay. The screen display of sarcasm, then optimism. Hopefully, it sends those copulators a message not to copulate with us copulators. At this, even sickened and obviously dying, the alien's skin near its mouth pulled back to expose its teeth. Happiness showed in the mood indicator, though Coatal always considered the most frightening display that he'd ever seen. This is copulating acting Captain Saltar proudly saying, "We copulated the bastards," and that the copulators who find this, I copulate salute you, copulators. Out. The last image was an alien raising a fifth towards the camera, then tipping the bottle back and finishing off its contents. Then the screen went black. The crews and the new captain sat stunned in silence as the recording ceased. The ventilation seemed loud in a sudden silence as the light came back up. Coatal stepped back up to speak. As you have seen, there are advanced races we have yet to meet. This race destroyed an enemy we fought for thousands of cycles in a single engagement with 2 ships, not to mention the entire system that they fought in. As GAX captains, you will behold the fate of the gas in your hands as you make your first contacts. The weight of responsibility could only be seen with each cadet. No, captains' faces and shoulders as they settled on them, Kotal noted approvingly. Their claws grew with each growing with the severity of the charge with the newfound respect. It's a long way through the dead zone, and I don't know if any of you will ever encounter these creatures. As a precaution, though, you will get a symbol of your status as captains so that they can easily identify your leadership position. At this, the senior officer near the stage started picking up replica fifths to each captain individually. We have recreated this fifth as accurately as we could. We even synthesized the contents from what samples were inside. Do not drink from it, it will kill you. The contents are closer to fuel than anything you can safely consume. Each of the new captains took their fifth and admired the clear silica shells and the amber brown poison inside. Most races we have ever met have a name for themselves that translates normally into terms of people generic. We changed that word to refer to the race rather than generic people to keep them from offending them. From now on, your translators will be set so that this race that self-identifies as Copulaters will always call themselves by their own world. This is the most powerful alien we have encountered, so it is important that if you should encounter them, you greet them properly. Watch as I do, then copy. When you finish, you are now captains. Stepping forward, Kotal raised his fifth and shouted, "I fricking salute you, freckers!" and watched in pride as all the new captains followed his example. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support the channel or the author, all the stuff is down below. And as always, I hope that you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next story. Cheers.